The fun will be is if our guest joins in on the harassment. I hope she does. That's Cindy Pulskamp. Cindy is from Hillsboro, North Dakota. She farms and she's also recently been appointed to the United Soybean Council. So we've got lots of questions for you, Cindy. But first of all, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Bridget and Dean. Way too fast.
Yeah,
Anyway,
Dean.
I was just saying, just keep harassing Justin way too fast.
There you go.
Thanks, Bridget, for having me on board here. It's been a while. You and I have been conversing about this for a while. I am a farmer from Hillsboro, North Dakota. And in the last 20 years, my husband and I, we farm the soybeans, wheat, and sugar beets. And it has been fun for the first time probably in the last 4 years that we have had farming. Farming has been pretty challenging in the area. So in 2022, I can tell you I did actually enjoy farming for the first time in a couple of years.
And why is that, Cindy? Just because the crops were beneficial this year? Enough moisture?
A combination of everything. Thanks for the good question. We've had some definite weather challenges from late 18 all the way through 19. 19 was probably one of the worst years of farming that I've spoken to many farmers that I've experienced, but spoken to many farmers that they didn't have this bad of weather since back in the 60s. And so 20 was dry and 21 started off very wet and then it got real dry. And so 22 actually kind of culminated with we had a wet enough spring that it carried us through the fall, and we had nice crops, no complaints here. I know there's other places in the country that can complain. And so I'm going to just sit back and say, you know what, it was actually a good year.
That I'm happy to hear. So I've already started to get some messages sent in with questions for you, Cindy. But before we get to those, I want to just talk a little bit about what you're doing as a soybean grower these days and how that leads to your position as an appointment to the United Soybean Board. Can you give us a little background on that?
Okay, so I am part of the United Soybean Board, which is the national checkoff board. So I was selected by the North Dakota Soybean Council to represent the state, and then they presented my name to Secretary Vilsack through the USDA, and I had to be selected and approved. And with some of the changes that happened last fall, it took a few months. Normally the appointments happen in December, but I was appointed in March of 2022, and I serve along with 3 other directors from North Dakota, Darren Cadlick from Peasic, Matt Gast from Valley City, and Ryan Richards from Kindred. A great group of people to serve with. I serve on a board of 77. We represent 515,000 soybean growers across 30 states in the United States. And so my part is to take what we have and put it into research and education and promotion of United Soybeans, not only throughout the United States, but throughout the world.
If you're on a 77-person board, how do you get anything done? I just, that fascinates me with that many people being involved. How does this work?
It is very impressive. They break the board into different committees, and we each then spearhead. I happen to be on what they call demand, and demand is, I guess, what people are looking to, where is the future of soybeans going? And within that committee, there are 3 other committees, and I happen to serve on the Innovation and Technology Committee. There's also infrastructure and the health and nutrition committees too. So they take your skills and your desires and where you want to focus your background in, and they break you down into multiple groups, multiple committees, and then they put us to work, and boy, do they put us to work.
Well, with being in the demand part of the committee, I would imagine you're probably hearing from a lot of people out there that are farming. What are some of the things that they're asking for, or things that you're trying to work on or implement?
So I call soybeans the lean green miracle bean. And it is because there is so many opportunities that this, I mean, it's in tires, it's in your tennis shoes, it's on road asphalt, it's in food, it's an animal meal. There's so many different things that it can be used for. And so in innovation and technology, when I'm looking to the growers, they want to know, where is, when you crush it, what is the oil being used for?
Mm-hmm.
When you do crush it, what is the meal being used for? What is the whole bean being used for? And what we do is we work with various organizations throughout the country, and we look to them and say, okay, we have this demand for biodiesel. It's huge right now. And they're looking to put it in your tanks in your car, in your pickup, in your semi-truck, in your combine, everything like that. So how can that happen? Because there's a lot of science that has to go behind making that happen. So it's utilizing and putting a greater value to something that we already produce and do a great job in the United States of producing it. And now let's get some value out of it.
I'd say there's a lot of value, and I'm looking forward to asking more questions about the innovation. So it is 1:30 in the afternoon. We will hit the bottom of the hour. We'll be right back with Cindy Pulskamp. She is our guest today. She farms at Hillsborough, North Dakota. She's also a recent appointee to the United States Soybean Board, and we've got more questions about global travel, some of the checkoff dollar questions that maybe from her perspective as a farmer. I've already got one in my inbox to pose to you, Cindy, so we're going to do that when we return right after this. Meanwhile, we have a guest on this foggy afternoon, and that is Cindy Pulskamp. Cindy farms at Hillsborough, North Dakota. She also is a very recent appointee to the United Soybean Board, which again is an appointed position, not just running for an electoral vote. And Cindy, I had a message come in to my inbox asking me, and this is in your opinion as a farmer as well, in the era of high-priced seed, fertilizer, fuel, and chemistry, one should be able to opt out of the soybean checkoff dollars as well as corn checkoff instead of forcing you to pay for it. That doesn't seem right. What might you say to that as a fellow producer?
I think every checkoff system faces those type of comments. And my response to that is, I'm a farmer. I know how to do what I do to the best of my ability. And my responsibility is to get the seed in the ground, get the best crop out, and get it to the elevator. At that point, I tend to not really know whatever happens to my product. And the reason why the checkoff is there is when we first got into soybeans quite a few years ago, the value of a soybean or a bushel of soybean at the elevator was probably around $7.50. And I think the last check I had last week, somewhere it was, or at the end of January or end of December, it was like $15.50. Now it's $14.90, I think is the last one. And those checkoff dollars go out to find new uses for the product to make it more valuable. So in the words of a former director that we lost way too soon in life, he said, we're going to take a few pennies out to put many dollars back in. And that is about the best comment I have ever heard in regard to using your checkoff dollars, is those dollars are used to go out and dream up new ways to use the product and new opportunities, and that makes your product much more valuable. Something as a farmer I can't do. I can't go to China myself and market my soybeans. And so we have many locations right now that can go out and do that for us. And it's because we use checkup dollars to lay down those foundations.
That's a really good way of putting that. Something I didn't really consider about. And, for a lot of people, they probably don't understand, or maybe that understands the wrong word. They probably don't know how versatile the soybean is and what exactly it can all be used for. And you had kind of touched on this in our last segment. You had briefly brought up some of the things that they use it for, all the different components to it, the oil, the bean, the husk, I believe it was, or something else, a shell. But could you list a couple of things that maybe people are like, wow, they use soybean in that? Because I know that they use the oil in electrical wires, like the plastic coating that goes on the outside to keep its flexibility and so it doesn't disintegrate. That's one of the purposes of soybean oil.
So if you have Goodyear tires, there's certain varieties of those. If you wear Skechers tennis shoes, it's on the soles of your tennis shoes. Going down the road, it's in asphalt. They've come up with a new way to mix it in. And obviously, we've heard much about the biodiesel and the fuel industry needing to go green. And there are many mandates that we're hearing out there. And basically, soybean industry is the part that actually led that and moving that into. So it's one of those things that without the research and the technology that the checkoff dollars added to, we would have never come up with these new ideas. As a farmer, I don't have the, I'm not a chemist or a super scientist is what I look at some of these guys that I talk to. Wow, they can just blow me away with what they know.
So can I add a couple of other items as well to that list for you, Cindy and Justin? Crayons, kids' crayons are often contain soybeans. A lot of folks buy candles, whether they're beeswax or also a soybean wax. Soybean actually burns longer and cleaner in most cases versus a number of others. When we talk about vegetable oils in cooking, often that contains soybean oil, which if you are a fan of mayonnaise, that would be a critical component. I have had questions from others saying, why do we talk about soybeans so often? Because they aren't for human consumption. We just feed them to livestock, and that would not be the case. They're a primary food ingredient for livestock, chickens, hogs, etc., but additionally for us as humans. So just a few more things for folks to realize why soybeans are so critical to our Red River Valley farming.
And Cindy, would you consider soybean the most versatile crop in terms of things they're used for, or would corn go above that?
Hemp's the other good one.
Yeah. I'm going to say soybeans are, because you can use corn in the food grade and you can use corn in the animal foods, but we're now also talking adding it into, like you said, Justin, into plastics, into a variety of other things. You can eat it in tofu. It can be in your specific heart healthy soy oils that you use. Bridget talked about candles. I mean, there's just so many things that this thing can be used for. In regard to when you break it down, the husk, it's kind of, you use every bit of it, and they use the type that America produces everywhere in the world. We're in 80 countries that we ship product to, and we export over 60% of the soybeans that we produce in this country. There is a demand for it. So that tells me that it's a pretty awesome bean.
So Cindy, you had mentioned that, okay, you raise soybeans, you also have wheat and sugar beets. Do I dare ask which one's your favorite? I mean, I know we're talking about the United Soybean Board, but maybe you really like growing wheat and this is your time to share.
There's a great opportunity in each and every product. Wheat is an awesome rotational crop for me because we use that as one of our sustainability options in doing weed management, because you can use that. When we used to do pinto beans, and when we got into the soybeans, the world just changed on our farm for us. And the sugar beets have just been a long sustaining crop in the Red River Valley. So to say that I have a favorite depends on what time of the year it is. If it's 4 o'clock in the morning and it's freezing cold and I'm laying underneath a beet harvester trying to dig mud out, maybe not so much that day. If it's the 28th of November and I'm in a foot of snow trying to harvest soybeans, maybe not so much that day. Or if in 2019, 65% of our wheat crop is laying on the ground because it's too wet to harvest, not so much wheat that day either. So each day has its pleasures and each day has its pains.
All right, you two heard her. Better weather during harvest. This is all on you.
Yeah, I do what I can do. I do what I can do.
Well, and Cindy, we use, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but we use the long-term forecasting method called the LRC. And I know we helped out a lot of our farming community a couple of years ago, well, even last year when we knew it was going to be a wet spring. If you know ahead of time that, let's say we're going to have drier than normal conditions, are you more tend to plant more soybeans, or what would you do if you knew? what the weather was going to be like, 3, 4, 5 months in advance?
There is some options. You can plant probably a different variety of soybean, but due to the nature of crops and the rotation that you want to make sure that you're keeping to make sure you're creating sustainable soil issues, you don't want to put soybean on soybean on soybean, or sugar beet or sugar beet or sugar beet, So we as farmers want to be responsible. So there may be some shifting between soybeans and corn, or maybe a little less wheat, those different types of factors. But I don't see that I would stop raising one entire crop. I would look probably for a different variety that is maybe a lot more drought tolerant, or weed resistant, or something like that, that I would be able to shift that direction instead of actually just stop planting that variety completely, or that product completely.
And that kind of leads into another direction. When it comes to soybeans and selecting what kind of soybean that you want to grow for the year, how many different varieties are out there? I'm sure there's, farmer A's seed, B seed, C seed, but like for like the main characteristics of these seeds that make them so different from one another, how many different kind of varieties of soybean are there? There's some that like just do really good in heat, some do good in drought, some need a lot of water, some are ready in 60 days, others are ready in 75. What's that look like?
Boy, you've probably done a little bit of homework here, I see. If we had about 45 minutes to an hour, I could probably touch gently on the overall topic that you're talking about here. But there are many characteristics. A lot of them have to do with the quality of soil that you have, the length of time that you're able to grow the bean. So every soybean has things like, is it iron chlorosis resistant? Is it susceptible to certain funguses or different types of weed pressure, GMO versus conventional, things like that. So everyone has their own on-farm, vision of what they want to do. And then they look to see if this is the type of soil I have to put it in, or that I'm going to put it in, where are the features within the genetics of that soybean. And I don't know if my arm is long enough to be able to list all of the varieties and the different choices that you would have in there. So there are many meetings that we go to, and visits with different soybean producers, genetically grown producers, that talk to us about what is best, and then we make those decisions from there. So it's not an easy answer, and you just don't go out and go, oh, I'm going to pick number A and here we go.
Right. Well, you did an excellent job at summing that up really quick. I mean, that was great, and I just think it's so fascinating, the selection you have. I mean, when I plant my garden, the first year I started doing it, I just went into Walmart and I grabbed a pack of corn and I grabbed this and that. Now I'm like surfing through the internet. I was like, all right, which seed is better than this one? This one can do that one can't do this. It's I don't know. It just fascinates me on how far technology has gone with that. And do you know how, like, what that time frame has looked like for where, you had a couple selections and now you have numerous? Do you know what that looked like at all?
I did. There were years ago, and I think, Bridget, you and I have probably known each other maybe 2 lifetimes ago. And when I first got into this, nobody raised soybeans north of I-94. It just didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And even before that, nobody raised them in South Dakota. So the genetics are changing so rampantly, but the world changed when the GMO, when Roundup Ready soybeans became available. The world changed. Probably one of, next to probably GPS, is probably one of the greatest changes in agriculture that was made available to American farmers, was the genetically modified. And so when you look back at what the I states were raising 25 years ago compared to what is out there now, it's like opening a Gurney catalog today. And I just got mine in the mail the other day, and it's like, ooh, it's like going through the candy store, And it's the same thing when you get some of the brochures for your soybeans, and any crop right now is producing that kind of opportunities for us in diversification.
That's super cool.
Yeah, and a lot of those hybrids and varieties, whether we're talking corn or soybeans, the advancements that we have made starting in the 60s and 70s were tremendous as we looked at drought tolerance and
Mhm.
disease tolerance. In 1997, when Roundup Ready soybeans were introduced as a genetically modified crop, that also made a big impression and difference in our weed control, et cetera. So we've done a lot in those years. And Cindy, you've been a great guest today. You've been fun to visit with. Could you tell us if people wanted to catch up with you somewhere, social media wise, et cetera, or with your work with United Soybean Board, where could they do that?
Absolutely. I can be reached. First of all, I'd like to, if anyone in North Dakota has questions, we have two great organizations in North Dakota, the North Dakota Soybean Council, and Stephanie Sinner is the executive director there, and she would be willing to help answer any questions that have to do with soybean related in North Dakota. And then the North Dakota Soybean Growers Association, Nancy Johnson, and both of them are very, very educated on how soybeans are utilized in North Dakota and throughout the region. Anyone wants to get a hold of me, please call me. Call me nicely, and please don't call me before 7 or after 11. But I'm on Facebook under Cindy Pulskamp. My email address is cpulskamp@rrv.net. And if you email me, I'll give you my phone number.
That sounds awesome. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us. And folks,